Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Um, it's a refresher for you to have an idea and to have an idea about oral communication in context since it was discussed um in your grade 11. So we will just do a fast discussion about oral communication in context. So, oral communication in context, it is derived, or etymologically speaking, it is derived from two Latin words, communis, which means common, commonness, and communicaria, which means to share. And according to De Los Santos Gazulas and Lucica 2016 that communication is the systematic process in which individuals interact through symbols in order to interpret meanings and generate understandings. In this one, in here in communication, it's really important to note that in communication, when you are communicating with others, the interpretation of meaning in contexts is likewise significant in order for the communication process to become effective. And when you are communicating with others, there are a lot of factors to be considered for you to analyze everything and to avoid misconception with others. There are seven natures of communication. Um the first nature of communication. It is Communication is a two-way process. It is necessary that at least two participants are present in order for communication to take place. It is an act that brings people together towards one common understanding. However, it is also expressed that at least two persons are involved, since an individual may also communicate to the self in the form of reflection, emotions, thinking, metacognition, and analysis. That's what you call intrapersonal. Next nature of communication is knowledge of language is significant. A common language is significant to be able to achieve an effective exchange of thoughts, the correct use and the selection of words to express an intended meaning matter a lot in conveying a message. When you are communicating with others, it's really important that you have the mastery of the language for you to understand with each other and also for you to avoid misunderstanding. The third nature of communication is meeting of minds is necessary. The receiver must be able to understand the meaning of a message in the same way the sender intends it to be. Meaning to say, kung ano yung gustong iparating ng sender, much better ito ay yung naiintindihan ng receiver. Kung ano yung intended message na kino-convey ng sender sa receiver, it could it could only say that communication will prosper, and also communication is being effective. Communication is being effectively conveyed by the sender when minds are when the two minds met. Next one is the fourth nature of communication is communication may be made through gestures, movements, gestures, and other forms of nonverbal communication may also express or convey a message. Hindi lang tayo nakikipag-communicate through oral or verbal. Some people, they use and they often um, nonverbal cues. They often use a nonverbal gestures, specifically to those who have problems with regard to speaking. Some people who are deaf, they are using sign language. The fifth nature of communication is that communication is universal. Communication exists in all levels of management or social groups, and it takes place among all individuals day in and day out. As long as you have something to say, kahit gabihin o madaling araw kayo nag-uusap, communication is universal. Specifically, when you have boyfriends and girlfriends who are having a bad time. So it could say that communication is universal dahil kahit hanggang gabi, kaya niyo pang makipag-communicate sa bawat isa because you have lots of things to say. Next one, the sixth natures of communication. Communication is a continuous process. Sharing or exchanging information is an ongoing activity. As long as there is something to be said, there will always be communication to take effect. It is a process that happens interactively. And the last one is communication may be formal or informal. We can communicate with each other through a formal way or through using a language that is not formal or informal through using with your language. So those are the seven natures of communication. So now I'll be discussing the next topic, which is the communication process and okay. Um, so next topic to be discussed is the communication process and elements of communication. As you can see, this is the as you can see in the illustration, this is the communication process. This illustration depicts that it is observed that communication follows a flow or follows a process, succeeding from the source to its destination. Primarily, the components involved are the sender, the message, and the receiver. And other elements, however, affects the process in such a way that they have become part of it. The elements of communication being presented in the communication process are as stated below, like the sender. Those those elements are sender, the message, the channel, the receiver, the feedback, and the noise. Let's discuss the elements of communication. The first one is the sender. The sender is the source of the message wherein he or she sends the message to the receiver. And the sender makes use of the symbols to convey the message and produce the required response. The second element is the message. The message is the key idea that the sender wants to communicate. It is the sign that elicits the response of recipient. The third element is the channel. You have to remember that in the channel, it is the means through which the message is being exchanged or transmitted. Meaning, kung ano yung ginamit sa pakikipag-usap o sa talakayan sa isang tao. The next element is the receiver or the decoder. Sila yung tumatanggap ng message na galing sa sender. It is what the message is intended. The decoder has to understand the message in order to provide an appropriate response or reaction. The next one is the feedback. Once the message is being sent by the sender to the receiver must decode the message. Once the message is being decoded, the, the receiver can now be a sender. when he or she sends his or her response or reaction. That is the feedback. Next, or the last, next one, next element of communication is the barrier. The barrier, anything that causes the communication process to become unsuccessful. This is something that may hamper that may hamper the communication. And the last element of communication is the context. The context is the communication is affected by the context in which it takes place. The sender chooses the message within a context that is understandable by both the sender and the receiver. This includes the location, the episode, or the manner through which the speaker expresses his message. That is of the context. Next one will be the models of communication. There are there are three models of communication to be discussed. The first one is Shannon-Weaver's communication, Shannon-Weaver's linear communication model. The second is Scrum's interactive communication model. And the last one is the Berlos SMCR communication model. Let's tackle the first. Here's the first model, the Shannon-Weaver's linear communication model. The proponent of this one is Claude Shannon. He introduced this communication model to portray the sending of signals in mass communication, like radio, television, or telephone. Although this communication model portrays one-way process where no explicit response is present. It is widely known for its simplicity and generality. Shannon and Weaver, 1949, distinguish the difference between the role of receiver and message destinations. As you can see, one of the key features of Shannon Weaver's linear communication is that it is a one-way communication, and the sender sends the message, and the receiver receives the message. And as you can see, there is no feedback here. And and the last key features of this model, it is the mother of all communication models. You have to remember, in Shannon Weaver Linear's communication model, it is a one-way process of communication, and the receiver um, does not require to send his or her feedback because it is one way. The second one is Scrap's interactive communication model. As you can see in the illustration, this communication model forwarded by Scrum in 1955, and it exhibits the communication process in a very interactive and transactional way, where where the source of the message and its destination switched places throughout the exchange of information. As you can see, one of key features of Scrum's interactive communication model is that it is um, two-way process of communication, and and there is a feedback. Sa isang model, sa Shannon, it is one way. Walang feedback from the receiver. But this second model, the Scrum's interactive communication model, the encoder can be a decoder and the decoder can be an encoder. There is a switch of position between the two. And the last model is a Berlos SMCR communication model. As you can see, this is more detailed. and it is an expansion. The SMCR or Berlon's SMCR communication model. It is the expansion of the linear model. Although this time there are various considerations that have to be presented in each component of communication in order for the process to be effective. For instance, the sender or the source of the message has to have a good communication skills, the right attitude, the knowledge, the cultural awareness, the social system, and also um, those are the considerations that we need to be considered in order for him to send out the message he intends to. These traits, moreover, should have the same set with the receiver for understanding to be achieved. As you can see, maraming factors or maraming consideration or characteristics na kailangan possess ng isang sender and the receiver in order to avoid miscommunication, in order to avoid misunderstanding. That is the last communication model. The last discussion would be the types of communication. As we all know that there are two types of communication, the verbal and nonverbal communication. In verbal communication, it uses oral and written expression of the idea or message through the use of words or symbol. And the second type is nonverbal. In the nonverbal, it is done through actions, body language, and other non-oral expressions. Nonverbal communication, there are lots of categories. The first category of nonverbal communication is kinesics. When we say kinesics, it is the language of the body movements, and that includes the nonverbal cues like late when running, smiling when happy, rubbing forehead when busy, or winking when joking. The second category is proxemics. Proxemics talks about, or it is the language of space or distance, which may tell people's relationship um, by how close or far they are from one another. The third category is chronemics. Chronemics is the language of time. And next is haptics. Haptics, it is the language of touch. And olfactics, it is the language of smell. The next one is artifactual. The artifactual, it is the language of objects or decoration. Ito yung mga, when a certain person collects a brand of clothing, kinds of bags or toys that they collect, like the antique. Those are the collection that falls under artifact. And next one is the language of physical appearance. It talks about the body size, the body shape, the skin color, the hairstyle, and the height of an individual. And the last category of nonverbal communication is aesthetics. Aesthetics, it is the language of nature, beauty, and taste. So um, that's the end of discussion with regard to oral communication in practice. I hope you have learned something. So thank you for today, and may you have a gentle day.